Today, we're joined by Josephine LoRe from Calgary, Alberta, Canada. And we're so pleased to have Josephine on the Poetry X Hunger interview series. Thanks for being here, Josephine.
It's my pleasure. Thank you, Hiram, for having me.
Um, would you like to provide the acknowledgement that you always do a
Yes,
wonderful job? Yes.
thank you so much. So I live in Calgary, Alberta, which is just north of Montana. And I would like to acknowledge that these lands have been traditionally inhabited and traversed for thousands of years by Indigenous people, including but not limited to the Piikani, the Tsuut'ina, which include the Dene, Nakota, Kainai, Siksika, and Métis, and their descendants. And I would like to thank them for having brought culture, language, and poetry to this land.
I'd like to think that their entire spirits surround us here today. Thank you for that acknowledgement.
Thank you.
Um, I want to introduce Josephine. She's a very special poet. Um, she's published 3 collections. That's the starting point. The first collection, titled Unity, integrates her photographs, her poetry, and her prose. The second collection, the Cowichan series, which was a Calgary Herald bestseller, was written about and inspired by the spectacular Cowichan Valley on Vancouver Island. And then she's just published In My Father's House, a moving, wonderfully powerful collection of poetry about family and place. Her individual poems have been published in literary journals and anthologies on 4 continents, 15 countries, and in 5 languages. So her poetry is well known globally. She's also published a number of short stories. Her poems are inspired by nature and family and contain lyricism and an amazing level of depth. Her writing oftentimes reveals an underlying universality, and her poetry echoes with truth. We'll talk about this in a moment more fully, but her poem, Enough, was picked up by Feed the Children and used in a widely shared and viewed 100,000 views public service announcement. So a Feed the Children public service announcement that was aired globally. We'll talk about that in just a minute. I always like to start these interviews, Josephine, by asking, what are your thoughts about the role that poetry can, should, must play in addressing issues such as hunger? What are your thoughts on that?
It's a very interesting question. And when I think about it, I think poetry serves different purposes. It is a form of communication. And in fact, if you look back in like the pre-writing times, before stories were written and stories were transmitted verbally, orally, they were transmitted in poetry because the rhythms and the rhymes and the cadence made it easier to remember and pass those
Yes,
stories on.
yes.
So it is a form of communication, but it's also a very powerful art form. So you're combining two. You're combining a message that needs to be expressed
Mhm.
and a form which, in its sparsity and succinctness, contains a lot of power,
Mm.
uh, and oftentimes resonates within the hearer and also perpetuates within the hearer. For instance, um, at the last presidential inauguration in the States, when Amanda Gorman recited her poetry, and she was not the first. I believe that Maya Angelou also read at a presidential inauguration. Those and Martin Luther's, the Reverend Martin Luther King Jr.'s "I Have a Dream"
Mm.
was seeped in poetry. So
Mm.
that's the power of the word as well.
Yes. I often remember Emma Lazarus's poem about immigration that sits at the base of the U.S. Statue of Liberty and welcomes in opening arms, lines that have open arms of welcome all immigrants to the U.S. A poem that
Yes.
helped shape our country's thinking about immigration, the US is thinking about immigration, and that we still need to pay attention to these days. So you're right, poetry does have that power to reach out and touch hearts, minds, and spirits.
Yes.
In recent months, as I indicated, Feed the Children reached out and included your poem. They selected it off the Poetry Ex Hunger website for including in what is a hauntingly beautiful public service announcement. Can you tell us a little bit about that work with Feed the Children, that experience?
Yes. Well, you initiated the process with a call for submissions for Poetry Ex Hunger, and I thought, I cannot solve the problem of world hunger or hunger in children. And I've just retired. I was a classroom teacher for 30 years, and I know that you can't teach children if they're hungry, that you have to meet their basic needs. And I thought, well, I can't solve it, but perhaps I could contribute
Yes,
my words
yes.
into like some people in their poetry choose to be or not be political or social or environmental, or address racial problems or social issues such as poverty. I think it's important that um, that we use the power of the vehicle of poetry to address it. So I loved the poem. I wrote it all in one go. It
Oh,
wasn't a
really?
hard poem to write.
Wow, wow.
Yes, and I was so thrilled that it was accepted not only for the website, but that it was picked up by Feed the Children. And it's my wish that if those simple words, if those verses can incite someone
Mm.
to think about this world problem and to contribute in some way, then that's one way of bringing goodness into the world.
And to raise awareness and maybe even open up
Yes,
hearts, wallets, and purses. So,
yes,
um, so what Feed the Children did then was they used your amazing poem, combined it in a video with obviously visuals
yes,
and music, um, hired, I think, a professional narrator to read your poem. So this is not you reading your poem.
yeah,
You read it beautifully,
thank
but
you.
they went with a professional narrator, and so we're going to see it. It's 60 seconds long. I personally, and I know I'm biased, but I personally think it's just a remarkable video. And as I said, more than 100,000 viewers have agreed with me. They've really picked up on this, and I'd like to think it's making a video that's making a difference. So let me get it queued up here, and we'll take a look at it.
Thank you.
Here we go.
If words were enough, I would sate your hunger. I would build for you a well, ever filled with water clean. I would work alongside as you till the field. Watch hope emerge green from the brown earth. If words were enough, I would end our misery. Watch each child of yours grow strong and true. Teach them to read and to write and to sing, so that their voices be forgotten nevermore. If words were enough, I would help you bear your burden, bring healing to your wounds, end strife. See beyond the lines on a map, beyond color, and you would know you are my sister, my brother, my child. If words were enough.
That's the poem Enough, with that haunting line, If Words Were Enough, by Josephine LoRe. If you'd like to review or go back and see the video again, as well as see the text of the poem, and I can't remember, but I believe maybe there's a recording of Josephine reading the poem. It's all on poetryexhunger.com, and the front page you can search for Josephine LoRe, LoRe. So, Josephine, that was just a remarkable experience. It gives me chills every time I hear and see
Same.
that video.
Yes.
Uh,
Yes. The images are very moving.
they're very moving, and the music
Yes.
is also, I think, very much in keeping with the tenor of the piece. As we close down, are there any thoughts that you'd like to share um, before we go?
I'm Yes, I'm really appreciative of the opportunity to bring a simple message into the world and have it be so widespread. Um, and as you said, if it can encourage someone else to think about hunger, to think about what we can do to contribute to diminish hunger, that's an amazing thing.
Yes.
Because ultimately poetry is just words on a page or sounds in the
Sure.
air. But to have the power to have people think about something in a different way and to move them, not just use poetry to express personal feelings and experiences, but to address a global issue. It's a huge honor to be able to do this.
Well, we're honored to have your talents brought to bear. You know, hunger is everywhere. It's overseas, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's nearby, and I'm sure that there's hunger in Calgary, uh,
Yes.
in Alberta, and throughout Canada, as there is in every state of the U.S., in pretty much every city, large or small. And so it's through talents like yours, through voices like yours, that we're working to make sure that poetry is part of the anti-hunger toolkit, and you've proven that it can be. So really grateful to you, Josephine. Keep up the wonderful work that you're doing,
Thank
and
you.
we're really, really honored that you're here with us today.
Thank you. We had spoken about, like, are there other ways to contribute?
Yeah.
And so I think about that as a teacher. In our schools, we would collect food, non-perishable food items for the food bank. We would collect items for Christmas hampers. I think, like, I think for a teacher who feels comfortable to invite the children to express, to create their own messages is very, very powerful.
Mm.
So this is not the same, but for Remembrance Day, we have an assembly in the school, and we talk about and we look at videos or student presentation. And as a follow-up activity, I had my students write letters of thanks to the veterans.
Uh-huh.
And so those were collected and sent to the veteran associations.
Mhm.
I think it would be lovely to have children not just bring in the cans or the boxes of non-perishable foods, but also think about hunger in terms of something that they can write towards and create change and post those messages, not only within the school, but maybe in like public bus shelters or other places, public places where people can see that, yes, we can think about these issues and not feel helpless or hopeless. We can be an instrument of positive change.
I'm so glad you mentioned that. If that wonderful idea, if you ever um, would like to pursue it and would need any kind of help from Poetry X Hunger, I have a feeling there would be a groundswell of interest in it. There is nothing more powerful than a young person writing a poem. Uh, the poem will grab everyone's attention, and the kind of the educational value of including asking and allowing the kids to write about what hunger means to them or some aspect of hunger could be really, really powerful. So please keep that idea in mind. And as I say, if you pursue it, please keep us in mind. That would just be a wonderful thing to do.
Thanks,
Well,
Harlan.
thank you again, Josephine. I'm so glad you brought that up. We'll be in touch, I'm sure. And in the meantime, you stay creative and keep doing the good work.
Thank you. And you too. Thank you so much.
Thank you.